Hey, welcome back to the ATT&CKcon couch. Thank you so much, Jamie, for giving me time to run back here. We really wanted to make sure that we prioritize giving you time with the speakers. So for our online audience, thank you again for joining us. I know looking at the screen is a lot, especially 2 days in a row, but we really appreciate you being here because it makes all of the work that all of our speakers have done so much more worth it. Also, shameless plug, meme contest. We're going to be announcing it at the closing ceremony. I have your flag, whoever you will be, in my bag. So we will be gifting that to you at the end of closing ceremony. So we'll announce that there, and then we'll be sending it out to you. That's just for our online viewers. Again, we really appreciate you guys being here. So now that I'm like resetting, you all gave a fantastic presentation. Would you all like introduce yourselves really quick? Just
Sure. Yeah, I'll go first. I'm Dr. Anshul Rege, and I'm an associate professor with the Department of Criminal Justice at Temple, and I also direct the CARE Lab.
And I am Rachel Blyman. I am a criminal justice PhD student with the CARE Lab at Temple University.
And I'm Katora Williams. I'm a doctoral student in the Department of Criminal Justice at Temple University and also a graduate research assistant in the CARE Lab.
okay, that's really impressive. Like doctor. Like
Well, in training.
okay, in training. I mean, really impressive because I know there's so many publications and theses and papers and research that years upon years that go with this, and then money spent, right? Like,
All of that.
there's all of that. So thank you so much because I know that like we definitely really need our people in academia to be able to like have that priority of time of like making the world like even better, right? So we really appreciate that. It's nice when industries can come together and like, you know, companies that have this research, but I feel like academia it's a very special protected place. So I appreciate that. I loved your discussion today. All of the points that you made about non-technical students, like reaching out to them, and then the social engineering was fantastic. I am a fan. I have an offensive background, so I'm super. And Jamie is really good at social engineering. It's like scary.
It's scary good, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, there's
And-
some. Yeah,
Yeah, and we were lucky. We roped him in last year, and he's like, "What are you all gonna do?" And we're like, "Well, this." And then we brought him behind the scenes, so he got to see what we were doing. And he actually, and this is what I love about the MITRE group, right? Like the attack group. They gave, like, Jamie actually took time out of his busy schedule, right, to engage with the students, to give them an orientation, to help us figure out how should we do the mappings. And we can't do this alone as educators. Like, we just can't do this, right? So when you have expertise that bring their A game to the table, and I'm not even talking about the live engagement, right? Just behind the scenes stuff, just helping us understand the matrix, helping us how, can students use this. And then, of course, he did engage live with the students, and he really wowed us with his social engineering prowess. Like, he's really good. You're right. It's scary good.
Yeah, it's scary. Like, I feel like anyone with that much natural charisma is just dangerous.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I feel like, we need to rope you in now.
No, I don't know what you're talking about. So, Anshul, is that right?
That is correct.
So,
yeah.
Anshul, so how can attack, like you had mentioned in your talk about attack being an education tool.
Right.
Can you kind of expand more on that? Like how?
Right. And one of the things that I think I've struggled with as an educator is how do I get students to understand the adversarial mindset, right? And how they think and how they move through attack chains. So the attack framework's really been super useful for that, and it really helps students who are not from a technical background feel like they can contribute, because that's one of the biggest hurdles that I've had as an educator is have non-technical students, well, we can't do cyber because we don't know how to code, or we don't know, digital forensics, like we can't. But I'm like, how people think, right? And how people work in groups. So how is this any really different, right, in that regards? Yes, it's in a different context. And I think that's what the attack framework has really helped me do as an educator, is figure out how do we help students understand these types of activities that adversaries engage in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Rachel, so we had talked a little bit beforehand. So fair warning to the audience. There was a couple questions that we had talked about that we felt were really relevant to ask. So I'm going to ask these questions, and then I'm going to sneak over to your channel And then we'll see if there's any in that channel really quick. So just haven't forgotten about Slack. But Rachel, how can non-technical students specifically, right? Like, which is another thing that you all mentioned. How can they benefit from ATT&CK, and what does that look like?
Right. Well, when I first started getting into, what the Care Lab is doing, social engineering, the cyber stuff, I was a criminal justice student. I actually met Anshul because I was a student in her class in undergrad, and it was a cybercrime class. And I had a cybersecurity, not a cybersecurity, a computer science minor. So I was doing a little bit of coding stuff, but I wasn't super into it. And I took this class and I learned that so much cybersecurity really does rely on understanding the human side, which is where the liberal arts, social sciences can come in. And when we implemented in class this ATT&CK matrix mapping project, it really shows that in these scenarios, these are cybersecurity threats, and you're able to understand them without any technical expertise at all, just by looking at the behavior and understanding the human and what they're doing.
I so love that you said that. So, like, my former background is actually human intelligence, and it has been amazing to watch the parallels between like humans and the silly things that we do, and then like how I'm just as stupid of a user as the next one, right? And then also understanding like how it's by understanding ourselves that we really understand also what the adversary is doing, because the reality is they're just another messy human on the other end, right?
Exactly.
So there's actually a talk that they had gone to, and it was talking about all of the other operators on the dark net, right? Like for TrickBot specifically, and how it was actually people that were just trying to feed their families, and they couldn't get a software development job, so they got a job with TrickBot because it paid, and they didn't really care what they were doing so long as they were doing development work. And it's insane, but you're right. It's just humans and understanding humans.
Yeah, there's a human behind every attack.
Yes, 100%. Katora.
Yes.
I love that name.
Thank you.
You guys have to, I love it. So as we've kind of like, you all have such a great diverse experience, and which I love. And as you've been in this field, like, what are some obstacles that you've kind of had to navigate throughout your career?
So there's a couple. First, I have like probably the most diverse background. Like I'm like for undergrad, grad school, I major hopped all over the place. So like I have a psych background. I was pre-med. Like I have a neuroscience degree. Like all these really random
So you're like
things
super smart
that I can, like these really random things that I can do, right?
Them.
So it was trying to figure out like, well, where do I fit in? Like I have all these, like I'm a jack of some trades, not all of them, but some of them. So like, how do I pull all these things together to figure out where I fit in? And then I met Anshul, and he was like, oh, you have all this psych background. You should be talking about fraud and lying and manipulation. I was like, oh yeah, when I was a psychologist, that's what I was doing. So like we should, and so then the social engineering came in, and now I'm starting to transition into privacy and surveillance and like all the psychology and the thought behind that. So it's just me trying to figure out like where I fit in and like how my skill set works. And then there's always like, you got to jump over the boys club and like tech and everything. And then like being a minority and trying to figure out where you fit in and everything. So there's all those like little things. But for me, it's probably like, well, what do I do with everything that I know how to do? Yeah. And like, how do I make money off of it?
Fair, because that's actually a thing, right? We got to pay the student loans back.
We got
right.
Fingers crossed we won't, but
Yeah. So that insider talk must have been really great then.
Oh yes, that's like me. I'm like, oh, I love manipulators. Like this is all like,
oh my gosh,
yes,
I love that.
This kind of thing is like, that's my jish. Like, so.
Oh my god, I love that word jish. Like that is like one of my favorite. My friend used that word. Like, what's your zhuzh? Like, is there any zhuzh to it? I was like, yeah, I don't really feel that. Yeah, that's not a good sign. Like, I need to find someone with a zhuzh.
Yeah.
It's such a great word for such a not, like, you can't really describe.
You don't know what it is, but you know what it is.
You know what it is. Exactly. Oh, I love it. All right, so let me find your Slack room really quick. What is the name of your Slack room?
I think that's it right there. Yeah, Williams. It starts with Williams Virgate and Plymouth.
Gotcha. And I conveniently have no internet connection.
Oh.
Woo! Okay, so
Look at big tech letting us down.
I know, awkward. No one look at this. No worries. So as that comes back up, because it's figuring itself out right now. Well, actually, it's gonna take it. I love live. This is why live is awesome, everybody. Just so we're clear, this is the benefit you get from it. All right, so you've had lots of people respond with like excellent project, and they love the awareness that you're giving to everyone for the upcoming generation. I love that comment. So it looks like not a lot of questions. Wait. Influence in the house. Kelladini's influence in the house.
Oh, do we social engineer at home? Is that what that means?
I guess so.
Yeah,
That's
right.
fair.
Like, I'm
That
sure.
is a fair
I'm sure
statement.
I manipulate my husband in some way.
God, I love it.
But I also have a child who's the master of social engineer at the house. So there's that.
Well, it sounds like you guys already hit up all the questions.
Yeah.
So seriously, thank you so much. That was a fantastic talk. And
Thanks for having us.
Yes, I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you guys bringing your perspective.
All right.
So, yeah. All right. Well, you guys have a great rest of the conference. Enjoy the closing ceremony.
Thank you.
All right. And we'll see you soon.
All right.
All right. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Make sure to post your questions in the Slack channel. I am checking them, I promise. Just not at the beginning of the talks. So we're going to bring up our next speakers. Come on. Snap Attack.
Hey, how's it going, Kat?
Good. So thank you so much for your presentation today. All right. So the fact that you are a physicist, yeah. I love that. I've heard so many. So when I was going through my computer science degree, we were in the same building as our physics department, and they were the best problem solvers.
They are, because everything has to be applied, right? So as an experimental physicist, I can't just solve a problem and publish a paper. I have to solve a problem and then run an experiment. And if it doesn't work, your funding's pulled. So like you have a lot of incentive to get it right. Yeah.
Super high stakes.
Sure.
Yeah. Could you guys introduce yourselves really quick to the audience?
Right. So I'm Jonathan Mulholland. So I'm the director of AI at Snap Attack.
I'm Fred Fry. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Snap Attack.
Nice. So we got two high titled positions up here presenting.
Well, when you're a small company, 5 months old, all the titles are pretty snazzy sounding.
Yeah, everybody gets a nice title when you got this many people.
Awesome. It sounds like, so in the military that I was in, one of the things they did, they would give you really sexy titles, and we'd always like reframe them to be like, and I'm a lawnscaping architect. Like I might be a human intelligence collector, but really I am a lawnscape master. Like, because the reality was the work is work. You gotta
do it all.
Yeah, you've got to do it all. Work is work, you know, like it's like 10% cool and sexy, and then like 90%, like all of this to do the cool and sexy, right?
Totally.
So what really, like, so I really liked how you guys kind of broke things down between the red and the blue. What were some lessons that you didn't expect to find that you found?
That's a good question. So, I mean, it's always been a challenge, like getting the red and blue teams together. So in our previous life, we stood up threat hunt teams for large organizations. And one of the challenges was, how do we collaborate between red teams and blue teams? And, you know, one way is through blog posting and texting and, you know, kind of like this, like, you know, superfluous, like, communication. We stood up ESX servers and VMs and stuff like that. And that really helped out a lot of like trying to get collaboration going. But then we really realized that red teamers, when they do an attack, the attack never changes. So one thing that's important is, let's memorialize that, right? They go through a lot of effort to perform an attack, whether it be a lateral movement or set up infrastructure of a domain controller and do curb roasting. All of these attacks take a lot of time, energy, and effort, but we don't have to redo them over and over again. So why don't we create a platform that memorializes that attack one time, and then we put it up on a shelf? And then the question is like, well, how do you communicate that, right? I mean, a bunch of logs is the obvious way, but if you can synchronize the video of what the attacker did at the exact same time, if you can synchronize the video of what the hacker typed, the keystrokes of what they typed, the logs of what the forensic evidence put off, and you can capture that one time and then share that out to a wide audience, then we don't have to recreate the wheel every time. Somebody can reference that as almost a Wikipedia of threats. So that was kind of our goal setting out.
I love that, because there's so much work when it comes to a lot of these things. So like cutting out that, like, I feel like one theme that has been very consistent through this entire conference is like that mental energy. Like, what do you only have so much of it?
That's right.
So what do you spend it on?
Yeah, and I mean, like the SolarWinds, like I mean, everybody was so burnt out because we were all recreating the wheel, right? And what we really need is, I think InfoSec is a team sport, right? I didn't coin that; somebody else said, but it's something that we really believe in. It's a team sport. You know, we all have our roles, so you know, one of the challenging things is how do you know when you have to recreate the reel or when you don't have to recreate the reel and you can use something off the shelf versus when you are the first person. And then when you're the first person, how do you share that to a large audience, right? So they don't have to recreate the reel. That's a real challenge, right?
Yeah, it's tricky too when you're the first person because then you're also the steward.
Mm-hmm.
So then
Yeah.
you have to go through that, like, well, what should I release? And if I release this, in what other ways would it be used for good or evil?
Yeah, definitely a dual-edged sword. Absolutely. I mean, any red team technique, tool, everything, it brings awareness, but it also brings risk and danger, right?
Yeah. So, what is one question that you guys wish I would ask you?
So I mean, being in charge of AI and data science, one thing that I'm always coming back to is, you know, why is data science and ML in cyber so hard,
Yeah,
right? So
that is a great question.
because it's so successful in other fields, right? You have this image recognition is amazingly successful,
Yes.
right? Like language processing is becoming almost as successful. And so why haven't we figured this out with cyber? And the issue really is that cyber data is so complex and nuanced, right? If you have one data type with imagery, right, it's just an image. If you figure out how to process that image, you're done. With cyber, right, you have many different log types, right? You have different OSs, and even within a certain log, like paradigm, right? If you have sysmon data, um, you have a whole bunch of different type of event types, and each of those you have to treat differently, and they might have to cross-reference to even make sense of one, you know, log entry over here. And that's kind of unique in data science. Data scientists are often used to being able to grab one or two pieces of information and just using them. You don't have to correlate across, you know, a dozen different domains and add like 3 different types of context to make sense of something. So that's something we're trying to collect on the platform, is let's get everything in one place and make sense of it within this idea of this red blue paradigm. So it's, you know.
That makes sense. And I remember, so when I was doing a lot of threat hunting, I remember one of the biggest problems I would have is finding the clean data, like identifying what's actually needed in those data sets. So that's so messy. So the more complex the system is, those data sets and those.
Right. That's one of the keys for these red sessions. So these attack sessions we create, the attacker gets to add a red marker right where the exploit is, and it can go right down to it's an interface where you just label either process or, you know, a log line. And it's very easy for a blue team member to go in and say, okay, well, okay, I can see, you know, a video of how this attack executed, and I can see exactly the log they tagged to say this is where the bad stuff happened. So it's very easy to clean up data, very easy to pull in like a window of logs around that time and say, this is what I need to look at.
Yeah.
So
Actually, just to add to that, like that's also one of our long-term goals, is to label data, right? So we think that MITRE ATT&CK is the way that we should label. You know, as you classify, oh yeah, not just saying it because here it's built into the platform. We've been working on it for a while. But labels in our platform are MITRE ATT&CK labels, and we think that's really powerful because you know, if you look at like T1003 LSAS dumping, then we can all get on the same page, right? As a red teamer, there's a Metasploit module that does T1003. There's an Atomic Red. There's you know, humans that do it, that you can inject it right into a DLL into memory. There's lots of different ways you can do T1003. And so what are all of those data? So when we train data sets for AI in the future, right, we're nowhere near that, but what we need is a lot of data cleanly labeled, and we need robust cases, right? There's a great talk talking about you know, process access that that was done by the team yesterday, and you know, there's so many variations. If you only detect on one FFF, you're going to be missing a lot of process injections. So I think the idea is to, you know, bring up many variations to figure out what variables the hackers have control over, and they can vary, and then which are kind of checkmate they have to do, because you cannot add a service to the, you know, the Windows operating system without touching this registry key, right? You don't have to use sc.exe or, you know, service create, but you do have to add this registry key. So finding the bottlenecks of attackers that they have to do, otherwise the operating system won't actually add a service. That's really critical, and it's really hard research. But the more variations of that data we get, the better at chances at finding that.
right, and having everything unified under a common language, so we can say, if you're trying to find these commonalities, okay, I'm looking at this particular sub technique, and then having the data already grouped in those sub techniques allows you to find those commonalities, and you don't have to do all this pre-filtering and research into what's actually in the data, right? It's already labeled.
Yeah, I can actually see, and then having experts like red teamers come in, I can also see that generating really good conversation with the community, being like, is this really where this happens, or is it actually here? But we do need to wrap up, and this is an amazing discussion, and I really want to continue it so we're clear. So I would definitely recommend, be sure to, for those of you that are online, I know you guys are down to continue to talk about this. There's a Slack room. Keep asking questions. All of our speakers are on it. So we can definitely continue that conversation here. But thank you guys so much.
Sign up today. We dropped the release today. So sign up, snapattack.com/community.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah. So we're going to bring on, what we're going to kind of do now is, because I'm going to be part of the closing remarks ceremony, so you all are tracking, we're going to be announcing the meme winner. So you have like until honestly, I would do it before closing ceremony, because at some point we got to stop looking at the computer, right? So do it before closing ceremony so we can decide who is going to be our meme winner, and you'll get the attack flag. So we're going to go ahead and hit up our speakers that are going to come in the future. So we're going to try not to hit too much of their talk and what they're going to be going over, but we do want to give you a little bit of insight. So I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Brian Donahue. I'm a principal security specialist at Red Canary, and I'm going to be talking primarily today about Atomic Red Team, which is an open source adversary emulation library of tests, really, that emulate adversary behaviors.
I am a huge fan of Atomic Red Team.
Great.
I know that you guys presented Atomic Red Team initially at the first ATT&CKcon, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was here at that ATT&CKcon, and I was like, who presented? And I think it was Brian Bio, our CEO. I hope it was. I'm embarrassing myself if it wasn't.
No, it's such a really cool evolution to be like at the first ATT&CKcon and then to be here and be able to speak on it again. And it's been such a successful project that you're able to talk about it.
Yeah, and for the first time, really, like ever, we have a proper team built around it. So my co-presenter, who's not here because he lives all the way across the country, and it was kind of insane to fly across the country for a 15-minute talk. So he's sort of like the product manager for Atomic Red Team. So we now we've gotten very, very like professional about how we're working on it and developing it. So like what I'm basically going to be talking about today is how we've taken an approach to like figure out what our coverage actually looks like, kind of starting with like defining what is coverage in the context of Atomic Red Team against MITRE attack. So like for everyone out there who may or may not be familiar with Atomic Red Team, it's mapped to MITRE attack. Like MITRE attack is the classification system we use to organize it. So for the first time ever, we're saying like, okay, well, here's how we define coverage, and there's intuitive and non-intuitive ways that we're thinking about that. And then also like, here's how we go about actually determining what that coverage looks like so that we can perform gap analysis and improve the product. Like not only to tell people like, hey, go contribute over there, or like contribute for this tactic, but also so that like users of the platform who may never have any intention to contribute to it understand like what they're getting out of Atomic Red Team as a product.
That's awesome that you guys are offering that support. I actually know a lot of people that what they've done is they literally sit down with their blue teams and their red teamer, and they have Atomic Red Team pulled up, and they're running each test one by one, and they're talking with their blue team like, okay, now what do you see? And then they're coaching them through it. And so I've seen it such a useful tool that is available and open for people.
And shameless plug. So one of the things I work on at Red Canary is our annual threat detection report, which we just dropped last week. So if you're one of those people out there who's like going through the attack matrix, just going like from top left to bottom right, running Atomic Red Team tests, like maybe don't do it that way. Like a better way to do it maybe is to look at like the threat detection report and look at the rankings for MITRE attack techniques in there, because they're ranked by prevalence, right? So like your testing should probably go by prevalence as well. So right, start with those things that are most likely to occur, and then move down the list to those things that are less likely to occur.
So that is an excellent point, and like in perfect theme with the entire conference, right? Like so many different talks have been about like how can we integrate like prioritizing with cyber threat intelligence first versus just like hitting the gambit. So it's a super valid point. Is there anything that you want to say? So our online viewers are kind of like exclusively getting this content during the conference. So it sounds fancy, but really what it is, it's really just a time for you to be able to share with them, like being the human behind the speaker, right? Is there anything that you kind of want to share with them as far as your journey in cybersecurity or the presentation that you're going to be giving?
Yeah. So the funny thing about the way we kind of created this talk was like Adam was initially going to give it, and then we talked and we were like, I live 30 minutes from Tyson's. I'll give it. You stay home. So we did this like cross country creation of the slide deck. And as we were creating it, one of the questions that immediately occurred to me was like, why are we including test difficulty in the like idea of coverage, right? So one of the elements that we factored into like defining coverage of MITRE ATT&CK is difficulty. How hard is it to run this test? And the reason for that, in my opinion, is like we need to make them as easy to run as possible, right? I hate the term like, oh, that person's technical or not, because I often find it used as like an insult.
Yes.
And plus, it's very loosey-goosey. It's like, SEO is technical, swimming is technical. What are we talking about here? So I use the no less insulting term, but funnier term of referring to muggles and wizards. So we want to make it as muggle friendly as possible, because ultimately, like if we want to solve the broader security problem, we have to bring more muggles in to understand like how we're doing security. So like in order to keep growing Atomic Red Team, we want to have tests available to folks who are new to security, less experienced, in addition to tests that are involved and more difficult to run. So that's kind of the most like counterintuitive thing I thought about the way we went about sort of defining coverage and figuring out how well we cover MITRE ATT&CK.
It's actually really smart and actually very insightful. So thank you. I really appreciate
Thank you.
it. I really appreciate you coming out here for a 15-minute talk, and we know how much goes into these presentations. So coming out here, thank you.
Glad to do it. It's my 4th time at ATT&CKcon, so I'm an ATT&CKcon lifer. So
I love it.
We'll
Good.
be back if you do it again.
Great. All right. We'll see you next year then.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Thanks. So next we're going to be able to talk to Tim. Tim was actually who I gave a shout out to earlier. He's been super helpful in working with our team on Linux. So we're super excited to have you here, Tim.
Hello. So I guess this is the morning after the night before.
Yeah.
Cat brought me birthday cake.
Yeah. So for all of you, it was his birthday yesterday. Should we ask how old you are?
Yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah. Avoid the question.
So, what do we want to talk about? Yeah, where do we start?
Where do we start? Okay, so how about tell us the story behind your presentation. How did you come up with the topic?
Okay, so background, because it's I think fairly relevant. I've gone blue, red, blue in terms of my career history. So I started off working in a SOC about 20 years ago in a bank. Spent a lot of time understanding financial services, moved through into Cisco, spent a lot of time looking at networks, and kind of realized that when it comes to the vertical specific stuff, the technology that actually generates your money, a lot of SOCs don't necessarily have the visibility they would like of that. Yeah, it's one thing to understand Exchange, to understand Active Directory, understand Windows, but yeah, the message bus inside a service provider, what does that even look like as an attack surface?
Do you think that that's because they're like, oh, well, if I can't see it, then no one else can too?
There's a degree of truth to that, and there are certainly not enough visibility of these kinds of systems in the wild. But I think it's also simply the fact that we're fighting an ever increasing deluge of attacks all over the place, and people start with the stuff that's easiest to find.
That's fair. That is fair.
But, and the reason for the talk is we have customers that want to understand those things better. I've got customers that want to understand what their telco environment looks like. They want to understand what a payment platform attack could look like. And so their threat modeling is that hypothesizing of what could happen. And then, we take it from there.
I love that. So I feel like there's a certain degree of bravery that a company has to have to be like, okay, let's rip off the Band-Aid. What does this actually look like if we open up the system and we really look at what an attack looks like?
Yeah, and it's a bravery that you don't get forced into. Nobody ever reports publicly on what happens inside the network once the breach has happened. They talk about the outside. They talk about the website getting defaced. They ransomware because you can't avoid that. But like the database dump, how did that happen? How did the adversary get access? Well, you don't find that in a traditional incident response report. So that's where I come in, is to kind of guess how that might have happened.
So it's still guesswork in the end.
It's absolutely hypothesis based on experience, intuition, an understanding of the applications. That blue, red, blue means that I've sat both sides of the fence. I've tried to secure things, I've tried to break into things, and now I'm coming back and saying, well, actually, this is what it looked like.
So then, like, all right, so for those of us that are not as seasoned in experience, because you have so many years in the industry, like, what are some key, I guess, like, what are some, like, methods of thought or questions to ask ourselves to be able to piece that together?
The simple ones are still the best. How's it authenticated? Do we have logs? Who has access? Where do they have access from? You can take two ends of the spectrum. If you look at Microsoft Stride methodology, it's a really good way of looking at threat modeling in a general sense, but it tends to be quite developer centric and it doesn't necessarily always cover the operational aspects of a platform. But it's still a good place to start because it starts to get you to think about, what does an attack look like? What data might they be wishing to steal? How would they get it out of the system?
So that's a good one for development, but not necessarily operational.
Exactly, and that's where attack comes in. It gives me that language. Everybody said it over the course of the last day and a half. That language, that shared language, that means that I can go to a SOC and I can describe an attack on Oracle DB2, MQ, or whatever else it happens to be in a way that they're going to be familiar with. They're going to understand, account compromise. They're going to understand password. If I talk to them about the database table inside a database that holds the username and password, they're probably not going to get that, at least not immediately. But if we can start to expand their field of vision, then we have a chance.
I like that. So you're about to go up and speak, which we're so grateful that you're here because you came all the way from the UK.
Yeah.
How long was that flight?
Second time speaking outside the UK as well, which is really insane. Like, I've done 20 years worth of speaking in the UK, spoken to attack and spoken to the German government. So they're the two people who've got me out of the UK.
I so appreciate the fact, because the other place is Germany, right? Like, where it's like American, which are two big, very differences in travel.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Very different cultures and very different languages as well.
Yes, and you speak German as well, right?
Enough that I got by. I wouldn't claim that the Germans understood every word I was saying, but we didn't have too many problems.
That is really, really impressive. We're really grateful to have you here, and for you to come on your birthday, it means a lot.
It's nice to be here. It's 3 years of being locked down. You've got to escape somehow, and what better place to do it?
You know what? That's a fair point, right? The escape from being locked down.
Yeah.
And what better way other than to find a way to not, when you do break out, and to give back to the community in another way.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, there's 3 years of thinking about all of this. So 15 minutes from 3 years worth of work. Yeah. It's necessarily short and brief, but you can always come and talk to me afterwards and we can discuss things in more detail.
Really, really appreciate that. Yeah. So for our online viewers, is there anything that you want to say to our online viewers?
Don't discount Linux, OS X, and all of the weird stuff you have in your environment, because when that happens and breaches do occur, it's typically somebody like me that turns up and gets very frustrated that there aren't any logs and there isn't any evidence and we can't really figure out what's happened. Plan in advance.
So no, that is so valid. Thank you so much, because that's a really, really good point. So, all right, we're super looking forward to your talk. Can't wait. And I believe we have one more speaker coming up, right?
Cool.
No? One more, right? Yeah. All right.
From our last speaker.
All right, so our last speaker is about to come up. I'll let them introduce themselves. But again, we're really going to look forward to that talk. Tim has been really great and a great partner. So how are you?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. All right, so I'll let you introduce yourself to our viewers.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Jared Stroud, and I'm with Lacework, a cloud security company. I'm super excited to be here.
We are very grateful for you to be here.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us about what inspired your talk that you're going to be giving later today.
Sure. So my talk is specifically on attacking containers. And I think collectively, similar to your talk on Linux and Mac stuff, Windows gets a lot of attention for obvious reasons. And recently, there's been kind of an uptick in container-focused attacks. And over the past year, we've actually been running some honeypots to collect data on those attacks. And we're super excited to share the results of those for defenders today, so they can kind of get out there and look at different ways to improve their security posture around containers.
Information sharing is my love language. So thank you so much. On behalf of the community, thank you for sharing that, because that's a huge deal, right? You can't defend what you don't know about.
Exactly. And kind of to add to that, we're also releasing the honeypot that we purposely built to collect that data. So other researchers can go forth, deploy that, collect data, see what you're seeing in your environment to kind of have an iterative process to improve the detections of actual attacks that you're facing your enterprise.
Nice. So, all right. I love that you're releasing that. So thank you, because I know how much work goes into creating these tools, right? And it's so easy to just like, okay, I created this tool. Like, now how do I get my return on investment for all of the time that I spent on this? And you guys are just like releasing it to the community.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at the open source community as a whole, and specifically all the things that Attack does for the community, we look at it just paying it forward, right? Because obviously Attack has shaped the community in a lot of awesome ways, and we're just trying to contribute back.
I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So with that said, when we release things open source, right, like honeypots,
Sure.
Do you have any suggestions for people that are going to be using it specifically, like for like if attackers are like, oh, these are the newest honeypots that are released that I need to be aware of because they have these signatures. Like, do you have any suggestions for those people to be able to counter, I guess you could say, OPSEC?
Sure. So just like deploying anything in your enterprise, there's always an associated risk with it. So understanding what you're deploying and the associated risk that comes with those utilities is super important. So just grabbing stuff off the internet and deploying it is never a great idea. We kept our honeypot pretty simple to audit, so that way you can kind of quickly iterate, okay, it's a pretty straightforward Python Flask app. Let's get it out there, public facing, to collect the data. But never deploy something that you're not fully comfortable with, especially when it's going to be collecting attacker data.
Yeah. I could definitely see that. And also knowing how to actually take that data back and analyze it and make sure it's not going to
absolutely
bleed into anything else, which I can only imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I've definitely been that guy that's like, oh, wait, did that go to master? Or did that go like?
Absolutely.
So yeah. Is there anything that so I know we didn't get a chance to talk prior to this, but I really want to give you, like, is there anything that you wanted to share with the community? I know that a lot of us have in this field. This is really a great time to kind of speak to anything that you've kind of gone through in your own career journey.
Sure. So speaking from personal experience, one thing that sometimes people ask me is like, how do I get started, or how do I dive into, let's say you're sysadmin and you're looking to do red team stuff or something of that kind of situation. Never underestimate the power of the home lab and just kind of tinkering in your off hours, and what that can do for you. I started off with like kind of like a simple blog, and it's done wonders for my career.
So I will ask this because you're releasing a honeypot, so it's like for the home labs, like.
There you go.
Like, so would that be kind of like the beginning of a home lab of releasing that honeypot and then doing it very well?
Sure. So if you're interested in kind of on the attack defense side of that, set it up in your own home lab in a VM and see what the requests to it look like, and then play the defender role and look at what data you can pull from that and build IOCs from it.
That's a really, really smart way to like go about it, because it's a really tough, like there's just so much data.
Absolutely.
And it's a lot. You have to know so much, especially when you're playing blue.
Yep.
You have to understand the red. And then when you're playing infrastructure, and then it's even more complicated. Like, well, did I misconfigure it? So
yes,
it's good to like, I'm really glad you're releasing something that's like bite-sized.
Yep.
So that's really cool. Well, we're really looking forward to your talk.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. We really appreciate you coming here, spending the time. So
absolutely.
We'll see you later.
See you later.
All right. So I believe that concludes all of our speakers for this segment. Do we have other speakers coming up? Nope, that's it. So that'll be all the speakers. I believe next time you will see me for the closing remarks, and we will be announcing the meme winner. So you have from now until not very long from now to be able to get that meme up. We'll announce when we have the cutoff. How about that? But we're really looking forward to seeing what you guys got. So we will see you next time.